So do you think after this eclipse you'll write another book?
Boy, I don't know.
Yeah,
There's I generally update the book when there's an eclipse where there's a lot of people going to see it. I did it in 2017. There won't be another total solar eclipse visible in the United States for another 20 years. That's why this one is so special.
for sure.
Um, However, that said, there are two eclipses in Europe in a few years where I might want to put together some cruise tours
Yeah.
and I might update the book for that. We'll
That'd
see.
be awesome. Yeah, we'd love to see it. We'd love to see it. So, uh, I want to get in a couple questions from your angle, and then we'll get into some history. So first off, six solar eclipse. That's uh, that's quite a number for folks. Why is your number so high? Why do you keep going to these things?
Well, partly because of my age. I've been doing this for a number of years. I saw my first total solar eclipse 45 years ago. So that'll give you some perspective. But that's when I wrote the first edition of my book Eclipse, and I saw totality and got hooked on it. And it's just an exciting event. People get really excited about it. As you can see, what's happening now in the eastern part of the U.S. Prior to the April 8th event, there's just a lot of excitement. And it's an awesome experience. It's rare, it's beautiful, it's magical, and for many people, it's a once in a lifetime event.
Was it hard convincing your college reunion folks to go out to Washington for this? They're like, "Are you sure? Really?" What was that like trying to convince them?
No, they didn't have to come very far. Some of them were in Portland and some in Seattle too. Here, they got on board. They thought it was going to be kind of cool. Yeah, so
What was it like
that
afterwards? Then they were like, "Okay, you were right."
they agreed. Yes, and several of them since have been on other eclipse tours with me. Particularly, we did a cruise in the Caribbean in 1998, and several of them were on that as well.
For sure, for sure. So you start off with kind of a walkthrough of it's the day of. What's it going to be like?
Well, let's first of all say that we're going to hope for clear skies.
Sure.
All right. So that's more your job.
For sure.
So on the day of the eclipse, there'll be some anticipation. In Indianapolis area, it happens in the afternoon, sort of middle of the afternoon, and so people will be. Some people will be driving around if there's partly cloudy skies, trying to find a hole in the clouds. But I suspect that on eclipse day, there's going to be a lot of traffic and you aren't going to get very far. That's my guess. um, so when first contact happens, that's when the very first moment that this moon starts to cover up the sun, and you put on your eclipse glasses during the partial phases, and you can see the moon take just a little tiny bite out of the sun. And for the next hour or so, it will gradually move across the face of the sun and cover up more and more of the sun. It won't be until about 15 minutes or so before totality that you'll really start to notice any significant darkening in the sky. But then it just gradually increases. It starts to get dark. And one of the most interesting things that happens at that point, Matt, is that, and I've experienced this myself, is that even though we know that we know what's happening, that this is just a natural event, an alignment of the sun and the moon, it feels weird. You get this kind of gut feeling almost that, wow, this is getting dark in the middle of the day. This is not right. Something's wrong. And it stirs up an emotion of kind of fear, primal fear. And so you can imagine how people who in ancient times who didn't know that there was going to be an eclipse, how they might have felt that when they didn't know what was happening. The sun's going away during the middle of the day. That's a significant happening. So and then last 5 minutes before totality, it'll start to get much darker. You'll have your use your eclipse glasses to see the last little crescent of the moon. And then just a few moments before totality, there will be a few points of light peeking out from this edge of the moon where the sun is shining through actually the valleys of the craters of the moon. So, and so those are called Bailey's beams. They're just little bright points of light. It just happens for just a moment. And then you maybe get one final point of light, which is called the diamond ring effect, because it looks like a diamond ring with one point of light. And then all of a sudden you're in the dark. and the corona will become visible, and you will also see some stars and planets. Possibly a comet on this one. We don't know. It just depends on how bright that comet is. It's in the right position. And around the edge of the dark disk of the moon, you may see some what are called solar prominences. These will be red kind of little flares that come up or a little bit about the edge of the sun. It's important to understand that this is not an interactive light show with a lot of anything moving. It's very static. So, but it's beautiful. It's awesome. I've seen it, like I said, 5 times, 5 out of 6 times that I've gone to a solar eclipse, and there's just nothing like it. So it's important to remember, wear these eclipse glasses during the complete partial phases of the eclipse, all the way up until the time that the moon gets completely covers up the sun. But when that happens during the 3 or 4 minutes of totality, depending on where you are, take your glasses off and look directly at the corona. There have been stories about people who kept these glasses on the whole time and they missed the whole thing. So that's an important point to so that your viewers know. Keep the glasses on for the partial phases, but then during totality, take them off and enjoy this beautiful sight.
Yeah.
And
I love
then
that.
after totality, the things happen in reverse. So
For sure. We've been trying to really talk to folks about, we've got really cool cameras on our phones, right? But you got to see with your eyes, right?
photographs and videos just don't do the experience the justice. There's nothing like seeing this solar corona. It's just magical. And what's amazing is that it's there all the time. It's there right now. You just can't see it because of the bright disk of the sun overpowers this faint corona. It's about 1 million times fainter than the bright disk of the sun.
Mhm. On your 6 total solar eclipses, I was going to ask you a little bit if you remember. I know in your book you said the 1979, the first one, it was completely clear. Is that correct?
No, no, it was
No,
partly cloudy.
that was partly cloudy. Okay, thank you for fixing.
And fortunately, right during the time of totality, we got a little break in the clouds and we're able to see the corona through some broken clouds.
Sure,
So it was
sure.
it was mixed.
So we are trying to figure out you've seen the path and the cloud forecast that's been spitting out for past several days probably now. And we've been getting a lot of questions on, we see visualizations of clear sky all the time, but what kind of things can we maybe expect for someone who's seen it on a partly cloudy day? And I was going to ask you about some of your other dates as well. What were the sky conditions kind of like? Was it clear,
Well,
partly
the,
cloudy?
the second total eclipse that I traveled to was in Hawaii in 1991 in the summer. And you would imagine summer in Hawaii would be clear skies. And on that eclipse day, it was partly cloudy sky with lots of sun, lots of blue sky. But right at the last minute, this big cloud comes right over and blocks the view of the corona, and we missed it. But what we did experience, even though the cloud obscured the view of the sun, it did get dark. It doesn't get quite as dark as at night. All right. So, but it gets dark, and it's an eerie kind of light that is visible all around the horizon. It's like sun. It's like you're having a sunset in all directions for those few minutes while you're in uh, the path during totality. And of course, when it gets dark during the middle of the day, nature reacts, and birds will maybe stop singing. Animals will act as if it's night, but it's a very short night, and then they come back.
For sure. Do you remember Brazil by chance? What this?
Oh yes, indeed. Brazil was clear sky, beautiful view of the corona. I went with a small group there, and we were out in the countryside, and it was very quiet. And just it was an amazing experience. Here's the thing about total solar eclipses: not everybody is into it. There are some people who think, so what? And during that Brazil eclipse, there were some people driving by in a car during totality, and they're just driving along, and missing not looking, stopping to get out and look at it. So,
For sure. For sure. Okay, skies, 1998 in the Caribbean. Do you remember what that sky was kind of like?
oh, well, now there's another example. There's an example of what I call last minute mobility, because the cruise ship docked that morning in Antigua, and the captain said, "Well, the eclipse was about middle of the day. or late morning, I believe. And then he said, anybody who wants to be on the boat, we're going to go out and find a hole in the clouds. It was partly cloudy that day. So he was, the captain with the, weather information, even though it was, 25 years ago, they still had some information about the clouds, weather, satellite views. And he was able to go out and find a hole in the clouds, and we saw a beautiful view of the eclipse that day. And
Best.
then the next one in 1999 in Europe was another example of last minute mobility. I was leading a tour group of about 50 people or so. We were on a tour bus in southern Germany, and we got up on in morning on eclipse day, and it was partly cloudy. Europe has a lot of clouds, especially even in the summertime. This was in August, and the so I'm sitting in the front of the tour bus with a big window, and I can see out with my watch and with a map. And I'm looking, at this map and trying to figure out where can we go. And we went back and forth around for an hour or two, kind of chasing a hole in the clouds. And we were very lucky at the last minute. The bus is zooming down the Autobahn at 100 miles an hour or something. And we got there, and everybody piled out of the bus with just a few minutes to get ready, and there we saw totality with it. So that's the advantage of being able to move around at the last minute to find, if you can, find a hole in the clouds.
For sure.
I think that on Monday, on April 8th, that's going to be problematic for a lot of people, because I think there's going to be a lot of traffic on the roads at that time. I don't know what the real issue about traffic is right after the total solar eclipse, because people will have arrived at their location at varying times beforehand. But when the eclipse is over, when it's like, the game's over, let's go home.
No, for sure.
And there's a big rush to everybody get on the highway to drive. And that's when you can expect the traffic jams.
Right. No, it's really good. Really good tips.
But fortunate, Indianapolis is one of the cities that hit the eclipse jackpot this year, because people don't have to go anywhere. You can just go out in your backyard and enjoy it. You don't have to go to any particular viewing location or anything like that. Just anywhere where you have a view of the sun.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. I know a lot of folks are trying to go to some of our big venues, but you don't have to. You know what I mean? You don't have to.
It's a different experience. I mean, I have seen eclipses with a small group, or even almost alone, like in Brazil. And it's a very quiet, meditative, awesome experience. But I've also been like on the cruise ship. There were hundreds of people up on the deck, and it was a big kind of celebration. And there's this collective experience of awe and a really, really good feeling in that kind of event. So it's whatever you want to do.
That's a really good point. Almost like watching a movie at home versus watching a movie in the theater, maybe.
Yeah, very similar.
Interesting. Okay, so I know we don't have forever, but I wanted to ask a little bit more on the history side. So you talked about a lot of different civilizations. I was wondering if maybe we could kind of touch on three of your favorites, maybe. What did that ancient or medieval culture think when a solar eclipse was happening? Because when we're talking to newsroom, some of the most interest is, what did people think in the past? And you go into detail on this, which is awesome. So I was wondering if you could maybe touch on a couple civilizations that your favorite.
Sure.
Story.
Well, the Chinese have the first earliest recording of a solar eclipse in their records, and the Chinese and other Asian cultures revered the dragon. That was a mythical beast that they associated with eclipses. And their story about an eclipse, a solar eclipse, was that the dragon was eating the sun. And so what they would do when during an eclipse, is as the sun was disappearing, being eaten by the dragon, they would typically make a lot of noise, bang on pots and pans or do whatever they could to scare the dragon away so that the sun would return. And guess what? It worked every time. So the dragon mythology even persists today. We see a total solar eclipse because we also have an alignment of the lunar nodes, which are the nodes of the moon's orbit. And in ancient times, they were called the head and the tail of the dragon. They're invisible points of space, but that dragon mythology carries over even into modern day astronomy. And so another interesting one was in, I think it was 585 BC. There were two Middle Eastern armies, the Lydians and the Medes, who were at war, and right in the middle of a battle, they're, they they were right in the path of totality. And, you know, moon covers up the sun goes away. They took that as a sign and they made peace on the spot. And the interesting thing is, though, eclipse, predictions in the future or going into in the past, looking at what happened in the past, are very accurate. So astronomers can, there were historical records about this battle, and astronomers could, they know where it was. So astronomers could look at when did eclipses occur there, and they were able to pinpoint the exact date. That's the interesting thing about eclipses. There are these markers in time that are very accurate, thousands of years in advance or in the history.
Yeah, in your book, you talked about the one in Amos in the Bible, how we now can kind of go back and see when that was or was about.
Yeah, you can put a specific date on this if there's enough detail in the record to pinpoint it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I was trying to remember, and the Middle Eastern story is fascinating. When I was a kid, I watched a TV show called on the Weather Channel, When Weather Changed History. But in your book, you kind of have when the solar eclipse changed history, kind of, in some of these stories, like the Middle Eastern armies,
Yes.
stopping their fight and getting peace. Was there another ancient culture, maybe Japan or the Babylonians, that you remember offhand that you thought was kind of fascinating on what they thought was going on during an eclipse?
Well, one thing that's very interesting is the ancient Egypt. Egypt was a thriving civilization for 4,000 years. And there are, we can again go back and, go backwards in time and see when did eclipses happen in Egypt. And there are many extant historical records from Egypt about other astronomical events and things that happen. They've never found a mention of a total solar eclipse, which is very puzzling. And what I talk about in the book is how that this image of the winged disk of the sun, which appears in many instances in Egyptian iconography. The theory is that the Egyptians thought the solar eclipse was so special that they never wrote about it, but they embodied it in this image. And the wings coming off of the disk represent the corona. There are streamers that sometimes appear, wide streamers. And that's the other, again, about viewing the corona with the naked eye. You can see so much more detail than photographs will render. So so just don't get wrapped up in trying to photograph it or whatever. Just enjoy it. It's a beautiful, special event, and it's an indelible memory that you'll have for a lifetime.
Why would you not recommend doing this? Why would you see it with your eyes?
The human eye is far more sensitive to slight variations in light intensity than any camera we can make, or any camera you can put in your pocket. Let's put it that way. All right. So a photograph will show some detail, but the naked eye real-time event is much more spectacular. It's just it's just our human eye is much more sensitive to these slight variations in light intensity and can pick up much finer detail than ordinary cameras can.
Love it. One more question about the corona. You said earlier most of what you're seeing in the sky is pretty static. So the corona, you won't, whatever it's positioned at, it's going to stay at, or will you, over the course of the 4 minutes of totality, if you're right in the center, will you see anything move or no?
The only thing you'll see move is the moon, the gradual progression of the moon.
Okay, that's really good to know.
Or maybe an airplane that flies over. Who knows?
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about your book as we wrap this up. You are very busy helping angel investors and companies and stuff. Yet you took the time to not only write this and several copies of these editions, this is the fourth, and then
Right.
you're traveling to all these places. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the passion behind writing this book? And as an author, what do people want? What do you think they should know about this book specifically?
Well, like I said, I saw my first, well, here, I planned this college reunion in 1979 and to coincide with this total solar eclipse that came across the Pacific Northwest. And at that point, it was just kind of an interesting coincidence. I thought, oh, well, this would be a good reason to get together, on a particular date. But then, as I started researching more about eclipses, I would find encyclopedia articles, I would find old books from a century ago, and none of them. There wasn't really a good book that brought everything together about eclipses. They were either out of date or they were way too technical from an astronomical and mathematical point of view. So there was no popular treatment of it. So I was working as a writer a technical writer at the time, and I thought, well, I'm going to write about this. And so it started with I wrote a little column in the Seattle Times newspaper that appeared a year before the event, just announcing it. And then I started pulling the material together, and before you knew it, I had a book. And so it just kind of snowballed, and I've just enjoyed doing it ever since. At periodic times along my life when there have been particular eclipses that I wanted to focus on.
What are there one or two things that you hope a new reader has never picked up your book before and they pick it up? What are one or two things that you hope they take away from your book?
Well, I think there's three. I'll go with
Three.
three.
No, go for it. Get a bonus.
Okay. Number one is the history. There's a rich history about how eclipses have, like we say, influenced the course of events, or people have responded to them. There was even this emperor in Europe who died shortly after seeing a total solar eclipse. People say because he was frightened about it. So there's a lot of history and scientific exploration. The second thing is to understand how these happen and it's really about how the moon and the earth and the sun interact and move in space and how they line up. And it took, ancient astronomers had a general idea of how this happened, but really in the last 200 years, the scientists have really refined the calculations about the motions of the orbits of the moon. And so the science has become much more precise. And that's part of what I document in the book, the story. The third, of course, is the awe that you experience. Now, when I first saw my first total solar eclipse, I was blown away. But I did not really identify at that time that this was the emotion of awe. It's only in the last 20 years that researchers have started to focus on this particular emotion, and it fits perfectly with what happens at a total solar eclipse. It's an unusual experience. It's out of your ordinary, day-to-day routine. It makes you, and it also gives you the sense that you are part of something much, much bigger. And of course, an eclipse happens on a literal astronomical scale. Imagine you're standing there in Indiana, central Indiana, and on a particular time place, and the sun, which is 93 million miles away, is shining on the moon, which is only about 240,000 miles away, and casting this shadow right on the earth that's only 100 miles or so wide. And you're standing right in this perfect alignment of the sun and the moon and your spot on the earth. And you get a visceral understanding of the scale of this whole event.
Yeah, I love that. We're excited. Where are you planning on being? Have you decided yet? Looking at a cloud forecast?
Oh yeah, yeah, we've been flying out tomorrow.
Yeah,
uh,
for sure.
so here's my advice for people who want to go travel to see a solar eclipse is plan your trip so that there's something else along the trip that's enjoyable. So that if you do get clouded out, it's not a complete wash. It's not a complete waste of time. So that's why we take these tours. We had a trip to Europe or Caribbean cruise or whatever, or 2 weeks in Hawaii. That was the good one. Even though we were clouded out, we had a great time in Hawaii. So I'm going to visit some friends in Columbus, Ohio, longtime friends, very good friends that I haven't seen in a while. and the day before, we're gonna drive over into the path, probably near Dayton or some, or we also have another
Sure.
place lined up that's on the center line in Ohio.
Sure.
So
Sounds
that's where I'll,
great.
yeah.
Exciting. I love it.
One more thing about the weather forecast,
Yes,
and lots of chatter online right now about, well, is it going to be cloudy or not? We can't predict it very well.
of
And
course.
here's the thing, even the day before, you can say, well, it's going to be partly cloudy. But as you well know, things it's weather is very local and very
Yes,
dependent. And what matters to an eclipse observer is not what the clouds are in general in your area. It's what's happening where you are, right where you are when the eclipse happens.
for sure.
And plenty of stories, like I shared earlier, where the clouds, you just have a hole in the clouds and you get lucky and you see it.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. If I was talking to some of my other meteorologist friends, and it was tough because I've got some coworkers who, not here at the station, but just in the community, posting
You
cloud forecasts 2 weeks out. I'm just like,
know?
well, it's hard for us to. We even got, a small chance of a light shower somewhere in the Great Lakes, and I can't even tell you when that would be. So, let alone a cloud. You know what I mean? So
Exactly,
that part's
exactly.
tough, but
So get out there and look up in the sky, and hopefully, you'll be lucky and it'll be clear enough, and you'll get a view of the corona.
yeah. Oh, one more cloud question for you, and I don't know
Sure.
if you know the answer. I was talking with one of the astronomers at Butler University, which is here on the north side of Indy, and NASA was one of their three locations that they're setting up. They're going to set there at Butler, and I was talking to the astronomer, and he said if we have high level clouds, deck of cirrus,
Right.
cirrostratus, he said, now you may not see the corona as much, which would be a huge bummer, but he said what could be cool, you may see the shadow a little bit more in the sky as it races in. Do you know anything about kind of that kind of stuff?
Exactly. So the moon's shadow, as is sweeping across the earth, takes about 2 hours to. Yeah, it's moving at about 1,500 miles an hour, and that's very fast. And if you're just standing on flat ground, you won't see it. You just, all of a sudden, it'll get dark. But with the high cloud deck that you're talking about, you may be able to see the shadow. Or if you are located in a position where maybe you're up on a little promontory or a hill or something, and you have a view to the southwest, you might even be able to see it real. Just, it's a flash. It happens like that. In 2017, I was up on a 9,000-foot mountain in Idaho at the top of the mountain, and we did see the shadow, and I know what to look for. And but it's very fast, and
Sure.
it's.
That's cool. That's super cool. Well, thank you so much, Bryan, for your time. Was there anything you wanted to hit on really quick about your book or what you want people to know or anything else? I think we covered quite a bit.
Just one other thing that I do have in the book is I talk about future solar eclipses,
Yes.
because what happens is that people see this event and they get hooked, and they say, just like I felt after I saw it the first time, I want to see that again.
Sure.
But where are the next ones? Well, there's like I mentioned earlier, the next total solar eclipse visible from the United States won't happen for 20 years. So what do you do in the meantime? They happen about every year and a half on the average, somewhere around the planet. Well, in August of 2026, there's an eclipse that's visible in Iceland and Portugal and the Bay of Biscay, and so that area. So that's one opportunity to take a European vacation in August, and then the following August, in August of 2027, there is a big one that comes right across the Mediterranean Sea. The Strait of Gibraltar is in the path,
Yeah.
and it
This
goes
is cool.
across Egypt. Yeah, it goes
I love
across
this map.
Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Luxor in Egypt is in the path. That's going to be a very crowded spot on that day.
Do you
So
think you'll head out towards Egypt?
no,
Not that year yet?
it's
No.
too crowded. I'll
Too crowded.
probably, yeah, we may do a couple of cruises in 26 and 27. Now, the
Good idea to me.
cruises are fun,
Yeah,
and again, you have that last minute mobility where you can get out and find the hole in the clouds on a cruise ship that you can't do as easily if you're on land.
for sure. For sure. Well, thank you, Bryan. This has been a pleasure. I love your book. And just thank you for your expertise. Thank you for sharing. Especially, I love it when someone has you have your career, you're deep in the investment community, but then you just love eclipses and you've
I
spent so
do.
much time going through. I love it. I absolutely love it. So good for you.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. It's my pleasure.